Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's panel, Tom Hauser. Tom started with 5 Eyewitness News in September of 1992 after a couple of reporting jobs prior to that in the Fort Myers, Austin, and Des Moines areas. Many of you might remember Tom started out on the law enforcement beat here in the Twin Cities, and I think it's accurate to say was promoted to politics in 1997. He runs a great public affairs program that many of us probably enjoy on Sunday mornings called At Issue. It's an Emmy Award-winning program. Tom has degrees in journalism and political science at the BA level and a master's degree in journalism and mass communications. So it's our deep pleasure to have Tom here today. Tom has won quite a few awards. Many of you might remember his work during the plane crash of the late Senator Paul Wellstone, and he's won quite a few awards for his At Issue program as well. Tom was born in Minneapolis and grew up in Edina. He has 4 kids. He's an avid runner. For those of you that are marathoners in the room, he's done more than 20. So please join me this morning in welcoming from 5 Eyewitness News, Tom Hauser.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Just going to start with about 45 minutes of introductory comments. That wasn't the punchline. I've actually got 45 minutes of introductory comments. I know Senator Rest and Senator Olson, they love the power of having that microphone in their hand. Well, Senators, I've got a microphone, a podium, and a bottle of water. I can go till dark if I have to. Hope none of you had plans today. Again, I'm grateful to be invited here by the Twin West Chamber of Commerce, although I do have to admit I'm a little disappointed in the Chamber this morning. You know, when you come to an event like this, you expect Chamber of Commerce-like weather. If anybody knows what that phrase means, it usually means bright and sunny, very pleasant day, anything a Chamber of Commerce would be proud to brag about. I walked in, I think, in ankle-deep water this morning. So just a little bit of advice to the Chamber. Maybe focus a little less on the business climate and a little more on the actual climate. Okay, just if you could work on that, at least on the mornings of these events. I'm glad you were all able to make it out despite the weather. I'm glad you could make it here. Speaking of the weather, I was at the Twins game last night. I'm a season ticket holder, and I have to tell you, I've been to 8 games this year. It's rained on 7 of those 8 games. Does anyone have tickets tonight? Anyone here have tickets to the Twins game tonight?
Yes, I do.
You're in luck because I'm not going. So, anybody have tickets for tomorrow night? Make other plans because I plan to be there. Well, let's move on with the panel. I know we ran a little bit long with the other items, so let's make sure we get enough time in for our panel discussion this morning. And let me begin. I'm going to introduce our panelists. And panelists, as I'm introducing you, you can walk up and take your spot next to your name tag. Beginning with Dane Smith. Dane was named President of Growth and Justice in April of 2007 after concluding a 30-year career as a journalist for the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press, where he developed a solid reputation reporting and writing about state, local, and federal government and politics. And I miss Dane at the Capitol. Ever since Dane and Eric Escala and Bob Wehrat and all these guys have left, I'm practically the dean of the Capitol Press Corps.
It's amazing.
And I'm only 28. So,
I miss you too,
again, that
Tom.
wasn't the punchline. That was not the punchline. Thanks, Dane, for being here. Next up, Blois Olson. Blois provides leadership for Thunheim Partners and its clients in public affairs, crisis communication, and online strategy. Prior to joining Thunheim, he founded and led New School Communications for 9 years. Blois is also, of course, a regular contributor on At Issue, a program I know 1 or 2 things about. Up next, Greg Pepin. Greg worked for 20 years at the state capitol in several capacities. As director of the Minnesota House Republican Campaign Committee, Greg was the architect of the GOP takeover of the Minnesota House of Representatives back in 1998. He is currently a partner at P2B Strategies, a Republican political consulting firm, and he might have some special insights into the legislature because he is married to State Representative Joyce Pepin, also known as the brains of the operation. I think Greg would even agree with that. And finally, Phil Krinke, joining us up here. Phil is the president of the Taxpayers League of Minnesota. Prior to joining the Taxpayers League in February of 2007, Phil served 16 years in the Minnesota State Legislature and held positions as the chairman of the State Government Finance, Capital Investment, and Taxes Committee, and is a huge supporter of public subsidies for stadiums. So, not sure how that got in there, Phil. That may have been a typo. I'm not sure. May have been a typo. I'm going to let each of the panelists start with just a minute or two of their thoughts on where we were just recently and where we're headed. Because, folks, if you enjoyed this year's $3 billion deficit, boy, we've got fun in store for you in 2011, because it's going to be double that, at least the way it looks right now. Let's begin with Dane Smith. Dane, a couple minutes just on where we are and where we're headed.
Thanks, Tom. We do research at Growth and Justice, and our research shows that 9 out of 10 Minnesota mothers say that if you don't have something nice to say, you don't say anything at all.
All right, well, that concludes our program for the morning. Thank you all for coming. Please tip your waitstaff on the way out.
So realizing that, and also realizing that I have to say something, I would just say that this session was a perfectly fitting into a perfectly miserable decade. By almost every measure, especially economically, from a business and a community investment standpoint, this was a tough decade, perhaps the worst since the 30s and the 40s. And I'm really deeply concerned as a citizen about the chronic, worrisome dysfunction and the inability to meet in the middle, to come up with courageous or creative solutions to very serious long-term problems. And we've heard all of the fine legislators representing this area talk about this structural budget deficit. I do have to say that when one of two sides with roughly equal power wants to use three tools, cutting, shifting, or raising revenues, and the other side adamantly refuses to use the state revenue-raising tool, what is the compromise? As it turns out, it's borrowing, it's delaying, it's shifting the expense onto local governments, it's kicking the can down the road. We've heard this phrase a lot. And we did this all decade long, since 2001, when Governor Jesse Ventura proposed cuts and tax increases courageously to balance a brand new budget shortfall. Now, what happened then? The leader of the Senate and the number 2 leader of the House were each running for governor, and so we did neither. And we ended this miserable decade with most of the important leaders in state government in both chambers and caucuses running for governor, and the governor running for president. And guess what? We didn't get the kind of courage that we sometimes get from people who decide they will do what's right and don't care whether they're reelected or, worse yet, elected to higher office. So certainly one could blame powerful interest groups, and we hear this a lot, both sides. You can blame the militant anti-tax groups on one side and the public employee unions on the other, but in the end, the elected officials have to accept the responsibility here. Maybe we need a constitutional amendment that removes candidates from higher office from participating in budget negotiations, and I'm kidding, sort of. Quickly, some really nice things to say, finally, about this session. The bonding bill did provide almost $1 billion in physical infrastructure. You can quibble with how many jobs, and I saw Senator Hand kind of disagreeing with this 20,000 figure, but they are private sector jobs. It's for flood control, bridge replacement, wastewater treatment, the kinds of things that Growth and Justice makes the case for. This is public investment that leads to business growth. We have a new response team at DEED that zeroes in on businesses that are at risk of leaving. We've got the encouragements to grow in bioscience, health, medicine, sector, and technology. And we fixed a goal of 100% statewide broadband access by 2015. That's good stuff. We have newer expanded tax credits for angel investors and research and development, and that was pointed out. But the best for last, there was some really serious progress made on the fourth way. There's actually 3 ways. You shift, you cut, you raise revenues or prices for business people. Remember this word. This should be your mantra. Get involved in it. It's redesign.